Our presentation for neurooccupation was focused on traumatic brain injuries. We looked at the Slagle lecture, Neurocognitive Rehabilitation Skills or Strategies by Giles 2018. This is presented by Shannon McDaniel, Kirsten Parks, Samantha Wash, and Miriam Alomar. Here is a little screenshot of our mind map that we created and the link that goes with it as well. The article we selected was the Giles 2018 Slagle lecture. This article focused on the effects of traumatic brain injuries and was centered around one individual in particular named Dave. So what exactly is TBI? Individuals with a TBI show poor judgment, decreased executive functions, memory deficits, slow information processing, attentional disorders, and poor divergent thinking. In addition, the inability to use new information effectively results in concrete thinking, inability to appropriately apply rules, and trouble distinguishing relevant from irrelevant information. The main focus of this article was on TBI and Dave. Individuals with TBIs are capable of learning new skills in many aspects related to neuroplasticity, cellular function, vertical systems, higher order functioning, regional and special systems, and the motor system are shown in relation to concepts within our neuro class. The main lessons from working alongside Dave is the power of practice and the use of meaningful occupations and interventions. Another key aspect within the article was the concept as a FAE. This stands for Fundamental Attribution Error, and this is the tendency to view others' unpleasant, irritating, or obnoxious behavior as fully under their control and result of moral weakness. Individuals with TBI may have difficulty expressing their emotions in relation to the FAE. The importance of repetition was also highlighted throughout the article regarding TBI as being effective and relates to memory, as memory plays a large role and can be impacted in individuals with TBIs. Another concept regarding TBI in therapy is the specific skill habit training, which is when the practitioner attempts to teach a specific functional task, and strategy training, which is the use of thinking strategies to enable performance.
In correlation with the Giles 2018 Slagle lecture, one of the major basic concepts of the lecture and what we have learned throughout this course is neuroplasticity. According to our Neuroscience Fundamentals for Rehabilitation textbook, neuroplasticity is the ability of neurons to change their function, chemical profile, and/or structure. Neuroplasticity is essential for recovery from damage to the central nervous system, such as clients with TBI. Habituation, experience-dependent plasticity, and recovery or maladaptation after an injury are three mechanisms that are involved with neuroplasticity. By implementing meaningful interventions with clients who have experienced a TBI, it will increase their participation, motivation, and engagement. Meaningful interventions align with the types of interventions in the Occupational Therapy Practice Framework, or OTPF, as well as the client factors such as their values, beliefs, and spirituality. In the Giles 2018 Slagle lecture, there were two types of trainings or interventions. One was the specific skill habit training, which relates to the client with TBI performing a specific task with repetition of that task. This intervention can generate experience-dependent plasticity that will help the clients learn and create new memories to increase occupational performance skills and automatic functional behaviors. Strategy training was another intervention that included thinking strategies, which produced new or adaptive routines for the client to learn and remember. Strategy training focuses on cognition and the processing skills the clients with TBI needs to relearn step by step with daily routines to increase participation, independence, and overall quality of life. This strategy training intervention is another example of activity-dependent plasticity. Both skill-specific and strategy training interventions supports occupational performance of clients with TBI. There are many aspects of cellular processing that are involved with TBI and connect with the basic concepts of what we have learned throughout this course. First, following a TBI can result in widespread tearing and breakage of axons known as diffuse axonal injury. Cellular damage after the initial injury can lead to other cellular events such as damage to the white fiber tracts and degeneration of distal axons. This leads to increased permeability of the axons and an excessive calcium influx, which will disrupt the axonal transport and intra-axonal elements. The widespread disconnection between neurons can have negative functional consequences. In addition to the loss of white matter as a metabolic effect of TBI would be cell death by overexcitation of neurons, which is also known as excitotoxicity. The excessive glutamate, which is an excitatory neurotransmitter, can kill postsynaptic neurons that receive a large amount of glutamate. Transcranial magnetic stimulation is used to help with people with TBI to activate local neurons through an electrical current. The magnetic stimulation causes the generation of synaptic plasticity in learning and memory through the mechanisms of long-term potentiation or long-term depression. This proves how experience-dependent plasticity, which is a specific type of neuroplasticity, is vital for neural recovery after a TBI. Lastly, synaptic plasticity can help improve voluntary motor output. When comparing both of the Giles 2018 article and the Carey 2019 article, both had similar key concepts that related to TBI. They both included neuroplasticity components such as skill learning, learning-dependent plasticity, meaningful behaviors and routines, and task-specific interventions. In addition, both articles mention the cellular and synaptic changes from neuroplasticity and meaningful task-specific interventions. Finally, both articles included the structure and function changes of the brain regions and networks with brain injuries and neuroplasticity.
Another main concept is vertical systems. This includes somatosensation. A big part of this is ataxia, and ataxia is impaired coordination that is not caused by weakness, spasticity, or contractures. It is a common disorder to all lesions of the cerebellum. Ataxia can impact gait, trunk stability, and movements of lower and upper limbs, and abnormal eye movements. TBIs can result in unsteady balance and coordination. There are 3 types of ataxia: sensory, vestibular, and cerebellar. The first one, sensory, includes normal speech, sensory loss, and an unsteady gait. Vestibular includes vertigo, hearing loss, and the individual may stand with feet closer together. Cerebellar includes vertigo, limb ataxia, and the individual is unable to stand with their feet together. The Romberg test is commonly used to distinguish between cerebellar ataxia and sensory ataxia. In this test, the person is asked to stand with their feet together, arms crossed, first with their eyes open and then their eyes closed. In cerebellar ataxia, they're going to have difficulty maintaining balance if their eyes are open or closed. But in sensory ataxia, the individual is going to have better balance when the eyes are remained open, but can become unsteady when the eyes are closed. This all ties into poor balance and coordination an individual may experience from being impacted by a TBI. So another concept is motor preservation, and this is uncontrollable repetition of a movement based upon the amount of neural damage. Another subsystem within the vertical systems is pain. One aspect that I learned about pain throughout our neuro course is that pain is perception. The pain matrix consists of brain structures that are involved in processing and regulating nociceptive information and are capable of creating pain perception in the absence of nociceptive input. This includes parts of the brain such as the brainstem, amygdala, hypothalamus, and thalamus. And top-down regulation of pain is disturbed when the pain matrix malfunctions. Experience of pain is strongly linked to emotional, behavioral, and cognitive functions. These are factors that are hugely impacted in TBI, such as emotions, behavior, and cognitive aspects, as they can become affected or impaired. Individuals with TBI can have emotional lability and personality changes, as well as disorientation and confusion. There are also some red flags for an injury and for TBIs, one of those being headaches. Some red flags that could need immediate referral to the emergency department include increased confusion, numbness of arms and legs, seizures, and decreased level of consciousness. There are also some signs showing that a headache could be caused by a hemorrhage following a headache after an injury. According to the OTPF, or Occupational Therapy Practice Framework, one of the client factors listed in the OTPF is pain under the category of sensory functions. Client factors include aspects regarding an individual's values, beliefs, body functions, body structures residing with the client that influence their performance in occupations. The client factor of pain could largely impact the individuals who have a TBI and their ability to participate in their daily occupations and performances. Some of these activities and occupations can become challenging due to the pain that they are experiencing, which could then lead to lack of motivation. Proprioception is also another subsystem under vertical systems. Proprioception is the awareness of movements and relative position of body parts. This includes the conscious relay, which is discriminative touch, pain, temperature, and conscious proprioception. There is discriminative touch, which is the localization of touch and vibration and ability to discriminate between two closely spaced points touching the skin. Conscious proprioception is the awareness of movements and relative position of body parts, such as ataxia and cognitive function, and the awareness of body and limb movements, which could be impaired in those with TBI. And stereognosis, which is the ability to use touch and proprioceptive information to identify an object. One example from the textbook mentions the ability to have a key in the hand that can be identified without vision. So in TBI, there could be confusion or disorientation where an individual is or could involve objects around them as well. The final main concept under vertical systems is the autonomic nervous system. This includes both sympathetic and parasympathetic. The sympathetic nervous system is known as the fight or flight response and impacts some of the body's functions. The primary role of the sympathetic nervous system is to maintain optimal blood supply to the organs. Overall, blood flow is important, especially blood flow to the brain. This could be impacted, though, in individuals with TBI, as maintaining blood to the brain and supplying other organs within the body may become impacted. The control of blood flow can impact the regulation of body temperature, blood flow in the skeletal muscle, and blood flow control in the head, regulation of viscera, and the metabolism. Parasympathetic nervous system is known as rest and digest, and this response also impacts bodily functions. The parasympathetic fibers are distributed in cranial nerves 3, 7, 9, and 10. Cranial nerve 3 plays a role in vision, and as an effect of a complete lesion in the cranial nerves 3 and 9 can include severe ptosis and diplopia, which are a brainstem disorder in those with TBI. And this can also be located in our mind map under the regional and special systems category under the subcategory of vision. In addition, energy conservation and storage is the principal function of the parasympathetic nervous system. The sacral parasympathetic efferents regulate bowel and bladder control. Both of these functions of the parasympathetic nervous system could impact the ability of an individual with a TBI to perform their ADLs and IADLs. It is important for them to have the energy and the responsive bodily functions in order to participate in their occupations.
Another main concept is higher order function. Behavior and motivation is one aspect under this. Connecting back to the Slagle lecture, meaningful interventions can have a positive impact on an individual's behavior or motivation during therapy. The area related with goal-directed behavior is the lateral prefrontal cortex. Goal-directed behavior is also known as executive function and includes deciding on a goal, planning how to accomplish a goal, executing a plan, and monitoring execution of the plan. The medial prefrontal cortex is associated with the emotion loop, which is reward seeking. An individual's emotion can also be greatly impacted as a result of a TBI. For example, the fundamental attribution error is defined in the Slagle lecture as the tendency to view others' unpleasant, irritating, or obnoxious behavior as fully under their control and result of moral weakness. If an individual working with someone with a TBI has this view relating to their behavior, it can impact the way they give treatments, which can cause more frustration for the individual with the TBI as they feel like they are not being understood. Another important concept relating to emotion is emotional lability, which is the abnormal, uncontrolled expression of emotions, which is common in TBI. There are 3 aspects of emotional lability: abrupt mood shifts, involuntary and inappropriate emotional expression in the absence of emotional experience, and emotion is triggered by non-specific stimuli unrelated to the emotional expression. Another aspect of higher order function that can be impacted as a result of TBI is attention and memory. Implicit procedural learning is the ability to express acquired information through performance and in the absence of consciously recalling anything. It combines experience and the general plasticity of the brain. Only activities that are practiced in the same way and in the same context are retained in implicit procedural memory. The more they're practiced, the more available they are to the person, the more likely they are to be repeated when cued. This is highlighted in the Slagle lecture when Dave learns to make breakfast. The Slagle lecture also highlights on types of memory that are affected as a result of a TBI. Declarative memory, which includes facts, events, concepts, and locations, can be impacted. Episodic memory can also be impacted, which is memory for individual discrete events with sensory and temporal associations still attached. And semantic memory is knowledge of facts about oneself, world, and historical dates. All of these types of memory can be affected depending on the location and severity of the TBI.
The regional and special systems include the brainstem/cranial nerves, vestibular systems, and the visual system. If the injury was to an individual's brain, the brainstem and/or cranial nerves could be involved and damaged. TBIs can result in olfactory dysfunction from damage to the olfactory nerve. Olfactory cells are located in the cribriform plate, which is vulnerable to facial or head traumas. Those cells then shear or tear, which leads to loss of smell or anosmia for some individuals. Some brainstem disorders that may result from TBI include the 4Ds impacting the various cranial nerves. Number 1 is dysphagia, which impacts the 12th cranial nerve. This involves trouble swallowing, frequent aspiration, choking, lack of awareness of mouth in the food. The second D is dysarthria, and it is the result of the 9th cranial nerve, which causes a speech disorder resulting from spasticity or paresis of muscles used for speaking. The other 2 Ds are diplopia, which affects cranial nerves 3, 4, and 6, and dysmetria, and these will be discussed on the following slides. As mentioned previously, TBIs can result in damage or lesions of cranial nerves. These lesions can also result from other injuries as well. The main ones include cranial nerve 3, 4, and 6. A lesion on cranial nerve 3 includes severe ptosis and diplopia. A lesion on cranial 4 usually results in diplopia, difficulty reading, and ipsilateral eye movement. A lesion on cranial nerve 6 usually results in diplopia, deviation of the eye inward, and being unable to voluntarily abduct the eye. The pictures to the right shows cranial nerve palsy of cranial nerves 3, 4, and 6. The direction of gaze is heavily affected when there is a TBI or lesions of the cranial nerves. This will ultimately affect performance skills in individuals such as ADLs and IADLs. The vestibular system is crucial for postural control and controlling eye movements. Usually those with TBI may experience impaired proprioception, which leads to poor or impaired balance and coordination. When examining the vestibular system for an individual with a TBI, it's important to ask them questions if they are conscious or perform tests to determine if the lesion is peripheral or central. It's also important to determine one's postural control, coordination, gait, and sensation. Another one of the 4 Ds from the brainstem region is dysmetria. Dysmetria is a lack of coordination of movement, which is a type of ataxia. It can also be defined as an inability to judge distance. The finger-to-nose test is a good way to test if one is experiencing dysmetria as a result of a TBI. The individual would touch their own nose and then try to touch the tester's finger, and so on. There are many vestibular disorders that can occur. Mild TBIs are essentially called a concussion, which are transient changes in mental state that can cause disorientation, brief loss of consciousness, and memory loss. Vestibular disorders that may result from a TBI might also include vertigo, which is an illusion of movement, and also vestibular migraines due to result of trauma to the brain. The Dix-Hallpike test can be done on an individual to determine if he or she has positional vertigo. One with a TBI might also experience vestibular migraines, which causes repeated dizziness or vertigo. Since the vestibular system is responsible for postural control and movements of the eye, one who has a TBI could have impaired gaze stabilization as seen on the previous slide, as well as problems with postural adjustments. All of these vestibular disorders and impairments could affect many ADLs, such as walking and running, as well as some IADLs, such as working at an active job. Having a TBI, one might experience decreased acuity, field cuts, visual neglect, or inattention. Acuity is the sharpness of vision measured by the ability to read or distinguish letters or numbers at a given distance. One has better acuity when the head is stable, so when one's proprioception is off in the vestibular system, an individual might not be able to have proper postural control, balance, and coordination, so it could be possible to have unstable head movements resulting in poor gaze stabilization. Field cuts are total blindness of the eye, half blindness in both eyes, right or left eye half blindness, quarter blindness, etc., etc. Visual neglect includes the inability to attend to the left eye of the visual space or the right eye of the visual space, and the individual is unaware of the stimuli in the left or right visual field. The last D in the 4 Ds is diplopia. This is the perception of two images of a single object, or in layman's term, double vision. Visual impairments can affect ADLs and IADLs and many things that an individual may have done prior to a TBI. OTs would then need to work with an individual with these visual impairments so that they can either adjust, adapt, learn, or go back to their occupations and being independent.
The last main concept is the motor system. This includes motor planning areas. One motor planning area is the supplementary motor area, which is involved in the initiation of movement. Another motor planning area is the Broca's area, which involves speech. The premotor area is involved in trunk and girdle muscle control, and the primary motor cortex is involved with voluntary movement. Depending on the location of the TBI, any of these areas can be impacted. Some specific motor deficits that can occur are paresis or paralysis, spasticity, contracture, and speech. Paresis is muscle weakness, while paralysis is loss of muscle function. Spasticity is characterized by a tight or stiff muscle and an inability to control those muscles. Contracture is when healthy muscle is continuously immobilized in a shortened position for a prolonged period. Motor speech disorders impact an individual's ability to produce speech, such as aphasia. Another part of the brain that could be impacted as a result of a TBI is the cerebellum. There are 3 specific functional regions that can be affected. The vestibulocerebellum regulates equilibrium, the spinocerebellum coordinates gross movement of the limbs, and the cerebrocerebellum coordinates fine distal voluntary movements. Motor pathways can also be impacted as a result of a TBI. The lateral pathway is involved in voluntary movement, while the ventromedial pathway is involved in postural control. Specific lateral pathways include the lateral corticospinal and rubrospinal. Specific medial pathways include the medial corticospinal, reticulospinal, lateral vestibulospinal, and medial vestibulospinal. Other pathways include the ceruleospinal and raphspinal, which act as the emotional motor system.